We are thrilled to have you with us for today's episode featuring our special guest, Dr. Christine Baker. Dr. Baker is a trauma specialist and somatic therapist with profound wisdom on the nervous system and its regulation. Beyond her incredible work she does in therapy, she's also the wife of Austin, who's a lead pastor in Birmingham, Alabama. She's a devoted bio and adoptive mom to 3 little ones. And as an avid reader and lifelong learner, Dr. Baker brings a wealth of knowledge to our conversation today. And we can't wait for you to dive into this episode and discover the significant impact you and your spouse's nervous systems can have on your marriage. So let's get started.
Dr. Christine Baker, thanks so much for joining us. Well, this is fun.
Yeah. Well, I personally, we're both excited about this episode, but I am super excited to talk all things like nervous system and nervous system regulation with you. And I am excited to learn from you. I'm excited for our listeners to learn from you. And for many of you listening, this might be like the first time you're learning about the nervous system and regulation and dysregulation. And I'm just going to let you know in advance, it's going to blow your mind. I feel like this line of work and this understanding about the nervous system now, it's coming center stage, I think. And I mean, just physical health and mental health, all of that. And so it's really got the spotlight on it. And I
Much
feel
needed
like
spotlight.
yes, and I've been doing some of this work myself, dealing with 2 things, some past traumas and some chronic pain. And it has just it's changing my life and I can feel the difference. And once you start learning these things, it really is life-changing. And I feel like it's going to be a missing link for a lot of people listening. And so I am excited to learn more about that from you. I know you are the go-to person on nervous systems. And so I want to jump into that. You have your PhD, but you're also a trauma specialist and a somatic therapist. So will you explain before we get started, what that is?
Yes, I'd love to. So, trauma specialist just means that you're like a therapist that has advanced training in working with
Mhm.
trauma. So, my first kind of area of focus when I started my career was actually working with sex addiction and betrayal trauma.
Mm.
And when I got into that field, I just was like, oh yeah, this is all trauma, like on both sides of
Yes.
right? And so I was like, I need way more training. So that was kind of when I started to, I did like this. Bessel van der Kolk used to have, I don't know if he still has, he used to have this I don't know, 6-month long thing where you got a little bit about all the different training modalities, which was
Mhm.
wonderful because then I could kind of decide where do I want to put my time and money. And
Right.
Nice.
yeah. So I started with EMDR, which was great.
Mhm.
And I also kind of ran up into some roadblocks with EMDR. So then I started
Mhm.
digging further and I found Dr. Peter Levine and his work with
Mhm.
somatic experiencing. And that is when I say I'm a somatic therapist, that's kind of where that language comes from. Ultimately, it's just a therapist who really believes that trauma is stored in the body.
Mhm.
So Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
So trauma is stored in the body, specifically the nervous system. And therefore, to heal from trauma, we can't just talk about it. We've got to
Mhm.
actually engage the body as part of the process. So, yeah,
Yeah, and I
that's
love that, and that's kinda what I was saying about the missing link piece,
Mm-hmm.
because, cognitive behavioral therapy and talk therapy, all those things, and even EMDR can take you they can advance you in your healing journey,
for
but
sure.
sometimes this nervous system work is what's needed to really experience that true healing because your body does hold on to things, and so it really is incredible work, so I love that. So, now
Mm-hmm.
let's jump into the nervous system. Will you
Mhm.
explain a little bit what the nervous system is and talk about the regulation and dysregulation and what that may look like?
Yeah. Which actually I was kind of thinking there's probably a lot of couples who know what it looks like. They just didn't have a term or didn't have the language for
Yeah.
that.
May have another
So
term
so
for
can
it.
you help normalize what that is, their experience?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. Well, this is my favorite topic. So I would love to talk about the nervous
Love
system.
it.
So the nervous system is our internal safety scanner. Okay.
Mm,
So it's the system in our body that is constantly scanning our environment to look for signs of safety and then signs of threat. And
mm,
so when And here's the thing, y'all, we do this all the time. So you may or may not know this. Now you'll notice it. Every time you walk into a new room, your eyes like go from one side of the room to the next because your nervous system
Oh,
is
yeah.
taking in that space. It's just this like subconscious thing, right? And so we're taking in the space. If we notice that the space feels really safe, then one side of our nervous system activates, and that's called our parasympathetic nervous system. And so that's
Mhm.
like the nervous system connected to feelings of calm and rest and peacefulness, settled, how you feel in a yoga class or how you feel at the beach. That's all like parasympathetic nervous system stuff. And so, but if I walk into that space and there's something threatening, like say there's someone sitting in the corner and he's kind of scowling at me, then my
Mhm.
sympathetic nervous system activates, and that is what activates with threat. So sympathetic and parasympathetic. And when my sympathetic nervous system activates, I'm going into more of a fight or flight
Mhm.
space. And
Mm.
so this man is scowling at me. Okay, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to go fight this man? Probably not. Or they're going to leave the coffee shop or leave the room. Most
Yeah.
likely, yeah. You know? And so, yeah, so that's like our two sides of our nervous system, our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. And so when we talk about regulation, what that means is that these two sides of our nervous system were meant to like move in very gentle ways. So I always describe it to clients like gentle rolling hills. So
Mm,
like a little bit of activation, little bit of sympathetic, and then a little
mm.
bit of settling, the parasympathetic. So I think a great example of this could be someone cuts me off in traffic. My
Uh,
sympathetic nervous system activates, right? Because I've
Mhm.
got to the wheel, slam on the brakes, brace for impact. But then once I realize I'm not going to get hit, I can settle back down, start listening to my
Mhm.
music, sing along. And that's my parasympathetic. So that would be a really regulated response to that. What happens with dysregulation is it stops looking like gentle rolling hills.
mm,
And quite often that is caused by someone having a lot of trauma experience in their
Mm.
history and that causes their nervous system to get like really out of whack. And so normally I love to explain this to people with like a little drawing.
Mhm.
So I'm going to draw it
Yeah, perfect.
for Chris and Jamie, but I know that y'all will not be able to see it, but I'm going to try to describe it and y'all help me. Like if you're like seeing something I'm not describing, please tell me.
Mhm.
But so how I like to describe it to people. So it's like we've got two horizontal lines. So picture two horizontal lines, maybe like 5 inches apart on a piece of paper. Okay. So a regulated nervous system looks like little hills up and down inside those two horizontal lines. And they're not going on top of the top horizontal line and they're not going below
They're
the bottom.
staying in bounds.
That's right,
Mhm.
exactly. And so these two horizontal lines, there's a phrase for this in the counseling world, and that's your window of tolerance,
Mhm.
which ultimately just means this is where you're comfortable.
Mhm.
And so when someone cuts me off in traffic and I do that little slam on the brakes thing, but then I go back to my music, that doesn't ruin my day, right? Like I'm still within my window of tolerance. I'm okay. When I experience something traumatic, I typically am going to go outside of my window of tolerance. So, like, let's say that I'm just like bebopping along within my window. And then all of a sudden, I realize or I get the news that someone has passed away in
Mm.
my family. Okay.
mhm.
So then I'm going to drop below that lower horizontal line. And this is going to be where our freeze response lives.
Mm.
So remember, I talked about fight and flight connected to our sympathetic nervous system. We've also got this response of freeze, fight,
Yes.
flight. Would it be helpful for me to describe what those three things are just for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, you know what? Why not? Sure, please.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of obvious with the first two with my example in the coffee shop, but yeah. So, like our if fight, flight, freeze. If I'm camping somewhere, which I would never do because I don't camp, but
What?
it
What?
was
Hypothetically.
city girl. Nope, I'm a city girl. But like, and a bear approaches me. I've got three options, right? I can either fight this bear, I can run away from this bear, or I can drop to the ground, play dead, and hope for the best. And so that's my fight response, my flight response, and my freeze response. And so this happens with emotional, scary things too. Like
Mhm.
if there's a bully at school, I can either fight the bully, I can run away from the bully, or the bully's yelling at me and I'm staring off into space, pretending it doesn't bother me. And that's my
Mhm.
freeze response. So fight, flight, freeze. So when we come back to our two horizontal lines, fight and flight live up above the top horizontal line,
Right.
and freeze lives below the bottom horizontal line. Does that make sense?
Yep,
Yep.
makes
Yep.
total sense.
Okay, perfect. So let's go back to our example. I find out that someone has passed away in my family and I drop below down into freeze, right? And so I'm like in shock. The doctor's telling me I'm staring off into space. I'm not really hearing anything the doctor's
Ugh.
saying.
Kind of numbed
And then
out.
numbed out, exactly, dissociated, if you guys are familiar, like, if that language
Mhm.
sounds more familiar, and then I realized, "Oh my gosh, I've gotta plan a funeral," and so then I spike way up above that top horizontal line into, like, overworking and intensity. I gotta plan the funeral, I gotta get the family here, I gotta do all these things, and then the funeral ends, everyone goes home, and now I'm back home and I'm watching Netflix and eating a lot of Oreos or something like this, right? Like now I'm numbing out again. So now I've lost my gentle rolling hills and
Mhm.
I'm just living in intensity
Mhm.
on top of my horizontal line or below my bottom horizontal line.
Okay, so sitting on the couch, binging Netflix, eating Oreos might not be a good thing. That's what you're suggesting?
It could be a little freeze responsey,
Might
right?
might be that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Just trying to take those
Mhm.
examples and help make sure that they're illustrated so people can see that. No, okay. I joke,
Yeah.
but this is the kind of behaviors that people fall into
Mhm.
because of falling into this dysregulation.
Mhm.
Yes, and it's like I mean, that's kind of a lighter example. Obviously, there's way more intense examples like alcoholism, porn addiction,
Mhm.
Mm,
even I'll even say this too, social media compulsivity, like all the TikTok scrolling that teenagers do nowadays. I sound like an old grandma. Uh, but like all of that, like that's breezy as all get out, you know? And so it is very disconnected from the present moment. And so when we have a lot of these experiences, so I just walked through what dysregulation would look like in a traumatic experience like losing someone.
mhm.
When
Mhm.
we have a lot of those over and over and over again, especially in our younger life,
Yeah.
our nervous system learns, oh, this is how we behave.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so now I live
Yeah, that's
below
the
my
go-to
horizontal line.
response.
That's right.
Mhm.
Or I
Mhm.
live above my horizontal line.
Mhm.
And so, like, just to give an example of that, we'll go back to getting cut off in traffic. If I'm a regulated person, after I get cut off in traffic, I kind of settle back down, listen to Whitney Houston, and I'm good. Um, because who isn't when they listen to Whitney Houston? But but like if I'm not a regulated person, then that person cuts me off, and now I'm just enraged. Oh
Mm,
my gosh,
mhm.
people in Birmingham don't know how to drive. This is ridiculous. And then I get to work, and Julie took my parking spot again. And then the secretary looks at me weird. And then my boss isn't appreciating me. You know what? I'm just going to work a 50-hour or 70 hours this week to show him that I'm the hardest worker here. And so I'm living right above that horizontal line. And
Mhm.
then when the day is done and I get home to my family, what am I doing? I'm exhausted.
You're
I can't
Yeah.
continue.
crashing.
I'm
Mhm.
crashing. And so
Plummet.
I'm
Mhm.
sitting in TV, watching Netflix or not hanging out with my kids or not spending time with my wife or my husband. So it's just our nervous system learns through patterns of experiences how it's supposed to act. And so when we get to a pretty dysregulated way of living, it's going to take a lot of intentionality and practice to
Mm,
come back to regulation.
Mhm.
sure. Yeah, no, and then when you look, we all have heard about you coming home and just giving your family scraps,
Mhm.
the leftovers, and that's a great explanation
Mhm.
of a probable reason
Mhm.
why that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful to think about those moments in terms of the nervous system because it brings in so much more compassion. Like if we just look at the guy or girl who gives their family the scraps, it's so easy for us to get into a place of like judgment about
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
person. But possibly they're surviving the only way they know how,
Mm,
Right,
you know.
and that's what kind of seems to happen in marriages because I think because some people don't really know they're living in dysregulation like that almost until they do get married,
mm,
and
Yeah.
then maybe how what they experienced in childhood starts manifesting in their marriage now, and they're seeing it on a smaller scale or something that even remotely looks like looks like a traumatic experience they've had, and now they're reacting and responding to that because even the spouse that comes home and plummets and checks out and lives in the freeze and avoidance may very well trigger
Oh,
the
yeah.
spouse on the other side, and now all of a sudden it shoots them into dysregulation,
Yes.
and that's when you get stuck in these loops and in these cycles, and so eventually we do need to learn and identify, and that's where this work can be life-changing is because they're light bulb moments. When you start understanding that's what's happening, maybe
Mhm.
something different, maybe it's not rejection of me, why my spouse is on the couch scrolling their phone.
Yep.
Maybe something else is going on here. That's very different. We don't need to defend ourselves against somebody else's traumatic responses
Yeah,
or
No,
their
or
dysregulation.
their pattern.
yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. So, what does this look like? Like, how would this come to life in a marriage if you have 2 people? And most of us have experience because there's different I'm gonna have you share this real quick. The different types because let's identify trauma, because
Yeah.
when we hear the word trauma, we think, "Oh, I've been in a car accident.
Big
I've had
T.
this big T trauma. This abuse happened." But what are some can you explain or expand like what trauma actually can be?
Yeah, that's good.
Because I
Yeah.
think most of us at some level have experienced it.
Mhm.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, I know so often my clients come in and they're like, I'm not a trauma survivor. I've never been sexually
Mm,
assaulted. I've never been
Mhm.
in a fire or something like this. And in reality, those one time traumatic events, while terrible, are going to have less impact on your nervous system than the more complex trauma that may be developmental in nature. So, what do I mean by
Right.
that? So, like things like having an alcoholic parent,
Yeah.
or things like even something like having a parent that never came to any of your things, you know,
Yeah.
mm,
never any of your baseball games or any of your whatever. That continued, like we said, the nervous system learns off of patterns. So if I'm raised in a home where there is a pattern of dysregulation, even if we want to say
Mhm.
that, then like that's traumatic. So so yeah, I think ultimately when we're thinking about trauma and the nervous system, I think the clearest definition is any time where you felt overwhelmed, like your stressor was overwhelming your resources. Because
Mhm.
the moment that happens, your nervous system activates and you're
Mhm.
going to go into fight, flight, or freeze.
mm,
And
Yeah.
so, like, anytime you were overwhelmed, like, I have this, like, really silly not silly, but, like, I have this memory that sounds so small, but my sister, like, broke something in my room, but then I got in trouble for it, and, but, I mean, I was, like, the hero child in my family, so I didn't get in trouble, you know? So this
Yeah.
felt little eight-year-old self very overwhelming, and it, like,
Yeah.
stands out, and I mean, there's a lot of other stuff in my history too, but, like,
Mhm.
that little moment, like, felt so significant, and it really taught me, like, I'm responsible for other people.
mm.
Mhm.
That's how I protect myself moving forward, you know? And so
Yes.
you see how my nervous system learned, "How do I stay safe? Oh, I'm in charge of other people." And
Yeah.
in reality, that's not true. That's like a
Yeah.
trauma reaction, right? So, but it's like these moments that might feel small have big impact. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I those things, those experiences, like, bleed over into our marriages
Mhm.
so
Totally.
much. When I grew up with the alcoholic parent and stuff too, and I had a mom who would kind of avoid dealing with any of the problems. And we had a sliding door in our house, and every time there would be a fight, like, with my stepfather, a drunken night and all that, she would come and he would be yelling at me, and she would shut all those doors. And so in essence, it was her turning her back on me. Now,
Yeah.
as a kid, like I remember those experiences, but
Yes.
I never grew up thinking like, oh, how this may have impacted me and stuff like that. But if we're in a conversation and this man turns his back on me, it's instantly, I mean, we did
Oh,
that one time. My mother had passed away and we were in bed having a conversation. You know, grief, it's its own animal there. But I was
oh,
crying, sharing a story. He turned around to grab his drink, to
yeah.
get a drink off his
I
nightstand.
had a tickle in my throat. I didn't wanna interrupt her by, coughing.
Yes. And it
Yes.
instantly, I'm like, never mind, I'm not going to tell you anymore because to me, you don't care.
You don't wanna hear it.
And so
Yeah.
that's what can happen, and we don't recognize that without understanding how our nervous system is and, like, how well we've trained it And, those become our automatic responses. And we
Yes.
don't really know because in my head in the moment, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
But if I understand my nervous system and how, like, I can start linking things together and start going, okay, I just went on top of the line or I'm going below the line now. I mean, that changes things. And now we can talk about the real issue. Now, after that, we know enough to know that was a trigger. And
Yes.
in the moment, I was too emotionally elevated to deal with it. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of couples don't understand, like, what just happened in that moment.
Yeah.
And so how would couples like what does when you talk about the, fight I do it every time.
Take two.
All of it
Fight,
here.
flight,
Yeah.
or freeze.
Of
Every
course.
time I do that, what are some of like, what do they look like? Like, what are some of the what's fight mode look like? What's flight mode?
Yeah,
All of
specific
that.
in a marriage relationship, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, let me talk like general nervous system regulation in a marriage, and then we'll go through like each of those three. So,
Awesome.
I think generally it looks like an increased reactivity and a
Mm.
decreased ability to listen.
Mm.
So, because
Say that one more time. What does that look like? Because 95% of our listeners just identified themselves.
yes, yes. Okay, so generally, nervous
Mhm.
system regulation in a marriage can look like increased reactivity
Mhm.
and decreased ability to listen effectively.
Mm.
And that makes sense, right? Because if
Yep.
I'm generally dysregulated, then what that means is that my like looking for threat mode is like on super high alert. And
Mm.
Yeah.
so I'm looking for threat everywhere, right? And so if my partner comes to me and says, "Hey, I think you forgot to take out the trash," and I'm constantly looking for threat, then like what am I going to do? Like, "Rah." Like I'm coming
Yes.
at you. Don't you talk to me about the trash. And so it's like this it's almost like we're wearing glasses or something where
Mhm.
we're looking at our partner through the lens of our dysregulation. And
Mm.
so we're misinterpreting quite often their intentions or action because we're putting so much like fear of threat on what they're doing. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
because in essence, we're almost labeling our spouse as the enemy.
That's exactly
And now
right.
we're defending ourselves against a spouse who may seem to be coming after you,
Yeah.
but they're not. And then I think what often happens is we do that, and now the other spouse is like, "What are you doing? Why are
Right?
you so upset?" And now you're
What's
in a
wrong with you?
full-fledged fight. You're battling it out, and now you're both dysregulated, and you're getting nowhere. Because
Yes.
I think it's safe to say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but two dysregulated people are not going to be fixing that issue
No,
in that moment.
I think that's totally true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we've got to come back to a state of groundedness and presence before we're going to get anywhere.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So when we think about these three states, fight, flight,
Mhm.
freeze, obviously if it's a person who is more stuck in a fight response, that's going to look like a lot of like escalation of conflict, maybe like more heightened emotional responses to things than what
Okay.
might appropriate for that moment. Someone who's stuck in more like a flight response, they're going to have a lot of withdrawal or avoidance kind of behaviors like, oh, we'll talk about that tomorrow, or I've got to get to work. I can't do this right now, kind of like
Mhm.
that running. And then people that are more in like freeze states are going to do that numbing stuff that we've already talked
Mhm.
about, but they're also going to have a real difficulty like expressing their needs and
Mm.
their leadership or their emotions because they're so numb, they can't actually connect with what's happening inside to be able to communicate that to anyone. And so the interesting thing is, I think one offering I would want to give to your audience is like, we really have to figure out, we have to learn our own nervous system and
Mhm.
figure out what is our go to. Like, we all do all three of them, but like, what's our primary one that we go to? And we need to know our spouses too so
Yeah.
Yeah.
that it can help us, like, in our communication. Because my primary go-to is freeze. I had an alcoholic parent as well, and so our nervous systems as children just mirror our parents' nervous systems. So
Mhm.
when we have an addict parent, which is a freeze response, we quite often are gonna be pretty freezy ourselves.
Mhm.
And so, like, my husband knows that about me, and so when he sees me
Yeah.
start to, like, stare off into space, he'll just come over and, like, put a hand on my shoulder, and he's like, "Hey, we're here." Like,
Mhm.
And that's quite different than maybe in the past. Not that he would ever be mean, but he would say, like, "Are you even listening to me?"
Mm. It becomes a trigger for the other one, and so
Yes.
now it's enhancing both of them, pushing them into dysregulation.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's like if you respond with, "Are you even listening to me?" It's going to make that person who's already in a little freezy state think, "Oh, I really am under threat here." Versus if you come over, offer some attunement, some safe touch, maybe a hand on the shoulder, then it's like, "Okay, wait, I can be safe right now." And that's going to help me be more present with you in this moment. So I think that's a huge piece is knowing your primary nervous system state that you go to
Mhm.
and then knowing your partners and how to look out for those.
Yeah, I
Nice.
love that. And I was just thinking when you were saying like how we pick up pieces of that from our upbringing and from our parents. And obviously we're pro marriage and we're fighting to keep couples from getting divorced. But nonetheless, there are so many of us that come from broken homes. And so it's not even just like your two biological parents that we're picking things up from. Most of us have a few different households. And
Mm,
so we're
mhm.
getting
Yeah, good point.
Yes.
dysregulation like these we're getting it from different places, and so I'm in and I'm gonna talk about
We're
this
getting
before
lots of
we
models of dysregulation.
right,
Oh,
and
I know.
before we go, but in your somatic wellness community, doing that, and there's a worksheet to be done in there, checking off which ones you do the most to help you identify which one you where do you go? I'm like, I'm all across the board. I'm like in all of these.
Yes,
I
is
have
there a
one that
season?
I
Well-rounded.
yeah, I'm very well rounded. You know, but it's so helpful to know because having this conversation and I think you're right, it does start with working on ourselves
Yes.
and knowing where do I fall when I feel dysregulated? I will maybe I'm one who will blow up more. I'm way more reactive than
More
him.
passionate.
Yes, I'm more passionate is the word.
Positive frame.
And I know and I know that, and it doesn't give me the free ride, I just don't get to say, "Oh, well, that's how I am," and like
Mhm,
that, but I get to know that about myself and bring my husband as a resource to
Yes,
know when he sees me like that, he doesn't need to defend himself, he knows my wife is dysregulated right now, how can I help her?
that's
mhm,
right.
And to
Yep.
know when my husband has checked out and is scrolling or doing whatever, and that's not his thing,
mhm,
but I
Yep.
can lean into that and go, "Hey, what's going on? Let me help reach down and pull you up or reach up and pull you down so they get in between those 2 lines again." And so instead of defending ourselves
Yes.
against one another, we can learn to be resources to one another.
mhm,
Absolutely. Yes. Like spaces of safety. Like how do we
mhm.
Yes.
a space of safety for our spouse? I think it's huge. One question that I like tell people to ask their partner if they feel like they're dysregulated is well, I wrote down the exact word somewhere, but I can't find it. But it ultimately is just what do you need right now to feel like we're a team again?
Mm,
Mhm.
mhm.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because it's just like if we're a team, then there's some safety there. Like we're
Right.
working together
I'm not
versus
against you.
yeah, like I'm not the threat, you're not the threat. How do we come back to that understanding with each other?
Nice.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. Now, earlier you talked about because I was actually gonna ask, so why isn't it good for you to engage when you're dysregulated? You kinda covered that.
Mhm.
So, I guess, one of the things I was hoping that you could share is so when each couple each members or each couple when each person's dysregulated,
Mhm.
what's something good to do to come back into regulation? Now
Yeah.
that question was great if I'm still regulated and my
Mhm.
and Jamie's,
Yes.
isn't,
Mhm.
but if they're both gotten and yeah,
Dysregulated.
dysregulated.
Yep. Yep. I think a great first step is to have some kind of timeout
Mhm.
signal each
Mhm,
other, or word or like a silly word like
Mhm.
pineapple or something like where it's like whenever we say that we've got to take some space. And then I think when you take that space, there's two important things about that. One, you say when you're coming back to the conversation,
Mhm.
because quite often some of our sweet flight friends will use an example to just run, And
Yes.
so instead we say like, "Hey, I need a timeout. Can we come back to this in 45 minutes?" and
Yep.
then you actually do come back. I think that's one really important piece. And then I think 2 is have a menu for yourself of different things that you can do to help yourself regulate. So
Mm,
the answer is not, I'm going to take a timeout and then I'm going to go sit on my phone and scroll TikTok for 45 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Because
right.
now I've just hung out in my freeze response this whole time. So the question is like, once I've learned what my go to nervous system pattern is, then I need to create, and you can Google this stuff, like
Mhm,
help me regulate from a fight response. And a lot of stuff will come up. So you'll have a menu of things that works for you. And that's what you do during the
mhm.
time out with each other. So I think that that's like a great first step. I think too, really practicing active listening.
Mhm.
So I think what I hear you say right now is this, is that right? Because that really helps that person feel heard, which helps them feel safer, which is like what we're
Right.
trying to do, you know? And yeah, I think that those are kind of some of the things that might be helpful in the moment. But then I also think that there's like these rhythms that we want to kind of engage in as a couple to help prevent more of those moments, you
Yeah,
know?
the more
Yeah.
like the habits we want to incorporate
Yeah.
to create
Mhm.
healthy. Yeah.
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 Are there daily nervous system regulation habits that
Mhm.
we should be doing together, either individually or together?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. One thing, this is going to sound so basic, y'all, but I heard this at a training and it kind of was this big light bulb moment for me. So, we have to start with the foundation of wellness, which would be eating, sleeping, and exercise,
Mm,
Mm.
which is so interesting because it's like if I'm not sleeping enough, my body is experiencing that as threat. If I'm
mhm.
not getting nutrition, if I'm not fueling my body experiences that as threat, you know? And so,
Yeah.
and then exercise is just like an incredible regulation skill. So I think that's one piece of like daily rhythms is like, how am I taking care of my sleep, my eating, and my movement of my body? So I think that's one. I think two is really having some boundary around screen time and
Yeah.
maybe like creating some like tech free zones in your home. I think it would be wonderful if the bedroom was a tech free zone so that the
Mhm.
couple can really just use that space as a space of connection and not distraction. I think my husband like used to roll his eyes about this one, but now I think he actually loves it secretly. Hugs where you don't release until you feel your body settle.
Oh,
Uh,
I love that.
yeah.
Yes. So like the my husband does not love hugs. We're growing in that. But like how he used to hug was like side hug, real quick, let go, that's done, you know? But now it's like I just hold him until he settles a little. And sometimes he'll over dramatically do it, like, okay, okay, like, you know? But there's really something to that because what's happening in that little bit of settling in that hug, your body is taking in that this person is safe
Mm.
Yeah.
and you're
Mhm.
having an embodied memory of this person is safe, they help me settle instead
Yeah.
of this person is a threat. So
Mm.
that's a great little like rhythm to do with each other. I think also like engaging in mutual hobbies or relaxation activities together because again, that's more time in the parasympathetic zone with your partner,
Mhm.
which connects in your brain, partner, parasympathetic, you
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
her happy nervous system. This is good, you know? And
Yes.
so, I think that's a good one. And then phrases that really support safety in the relationship, like, I'm so glad you're my partner. I'm so
Mm.
happy to be with you. And so I think those are all things that I would say are really great, like daily rhythms for couples.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love that, and even, going back to, like, the phone, I mean, obviously, the phone nowadays is just hijacking our dopamine system
Yes.
and stuff. I mean, it's just really there's lots of research out there that you can Google and find out, but it
Yeah.
also I think some of the damage it's causing is when we're always looking down, we're not
Yes.
looking at one another.
Mm.
And there's
Yes.
something
Mhm.
about the eye contact
Yeah.
that
Yes.
creates safety because we don't make eye contact with our enemies. We don't
Yeah.
make eye contact with our threats, and so when you're talking face to face, you've got the
Yeah.
mirror neurons going on, but you've got that
Yes.
eye contact that is affirming that my spouse is my safety zone. And so when we're always on our phones and disengaged, and even in society,
Yeah.
you can't be in a waiting room anymore without people, everybody scrolling. You can't even find somebody to
I
make eye
know.
contact with, and all the things
No.
you're talking about there, God made us for community.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
made us for He's very relational. He made
Mm.
us to be in relationship and engage with one another. He made us for rest.
Mm,
What other God commands you to take a Sabbath and rest?
yeah,
So true.
And it's like we're not meant to be serving and working and doing and going all the time. We're not designed to be on. We are designed to rest and to, I mean, live in that regulated nervous system.
mhm.
So this work, I mean, it really is nervous system work really is aligning us with where God wants us to be.
Yeah, it shouldn't be any surprise that the things that you're recommending are that
Mhm.
to be helpful are the things that promote what God promotes.
Yeah.
Loving him, loving others.
Yes, yes. Well, and I think about like Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I'm God.
Mm.
Mm,
Like, be
Yeah.
still. When I'm like still and
Yeah.
settled, maybe parasympathetic, maybe I know I'm putting
mhm.
words there, but like possibly, and
Yeah.
know that I'm God. Stillness brings this like knowledge of God. And so it's
Yes.
like, it's just really, yeah, I think it's holy work. I really
Yeah,
do.
Mhm,
I agree,
mhm.
and even just the second part of that, know that I'm God. Like, how do you feel when you can enter in
Yes.
with your stress and the chaos and even the traumas of life going, "I know that God
It's safe.
is God." There's not much
God's
more
got you.
safety than really feeling in our
Mhm.
stillness that God is in control, that he's still on his throne. He's gonna make this good. He's gonna use it for his glory. He's gonna use it for a higher purpose. And it's when we remember that God is God, that's just
Yeah.
it's like your husband getting that dramatic hug, you
I
know?
know that's
So it's that kind of feeling. But I wanna share with all this too so you can encourage people. This is not, "Oh, I've learned this. I know what my where I get dysregulated and how. I know what my zone I go to is. So now."
Or more likely, it's I know what my spouse's zone is.
You can identify
They're
there.
so speculated. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it may feel like, "Okay, so I know this information, so now let me fix it." But the
Yeah.
reality is it probably took years
Yeah.
to have these wirings in our brain and to get
Oh,
into
yeah.
that deep dysregulation. And so
Yeah.
we're not going to get out of this overnight just by going, "Oh, I have an awareness now." And so
All
there
good.
is some time that this takes, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I talk about this a lot with my clients, like healing is a journey,
Mm.
progress, not perfection, to quote AA.
Yeah.
Because it's like you said, so much of our nervous system dysregulation happened
Mhm.
over years. And
Mhm.
so it's going to take time to start to really show our body and our nervous system, no, this can actually be safe. And
Yeah.
so, an example that I've heard before is like if someone is knocked off a horse, anytime they are around a horse, think about a horse, or on a farm, anything like that,
Yeah.
they're going to be nervous. Like there's going to be a sense of threat in the room or in the space because, well, last time I was with a horse, that was pretty scary.
Mm,
And
mhm.
it's going to take a lot of experiences of safety with horses to actually start to feel like maybe I'm okay with horses,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or like maybe I can even be a little settled. Maybe I can even enjoy horses. Maybe I can
Yeah.
even get to a point where horses are now a resource for me.
Mm,
And I think that
Yeah.
it's really similar with couples, particularly couples I work with in the betrayal trauma
mhm.
sphere, is like there has been a really difficult, painful, threatening
Mhm.
experience,
Right.
so it is not gonna be just one moment of safety that now I feel safe with the horse again. It's
Right.
like it's going to take a lot of these moments of showing up and being that safe space for the
Mhm.
nervous system to start to rest down and not
Yeah.
feel like to be on threat response mode, you know?
Yeah, because your brain is trying to keep you safe, and so when
Yeah.
you try to resist and the first time, like, you're reminding yourself, "I am safe," you've got a brain that's going, "Well,
Yeah.
you've never been safe in this situation," and it wants to kind of protest that, and
Mhm.
then after repeating, doing the calming things more, now it's like, "Okay, wait, I thought this was dangerous, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like it's so dangerous," and
And
then
I'm
that just gets
okay.
better and better. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then
Mhm,
eventually it's like, "Okay, we're doing a new thing here. I that used to be a threat, but it's not anymore." And I think that healing I believe I don't think this is always the case, but it should be the case when we do this, like, when we're healing our own nervous system,
Yeah.
it should actually happen quicker when we have our spouse on board helping us.
mm,
Yeah.
Because now there's 2 of us, and now
mhm,
there's I've got him entering in going, like you said in the beginning with your husband,
yeah.
Yeah.
"You're okay. We're
Yeah.
here.
Yep.
We're right
Are
here."
you suggesting that 2 are a better return than 1?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, hey, you know what? I'm on board with that.
That's what
I
I'm
love
suggesting.
that.
So,
Yeah.
I love that. So, there is total hope, and, like, you can, like, heal your marriage and a lot of the conflict and the dysregulation in your
Mhm,
marriage by healing your own nervous system.
Yes.
Because then
I
you're showing up differently in your marriage. You're less defensive, you're less triggered, you're less
mhm,
avoidant. We work with
Yeah.
couples all the time, and a lot of them are avoiders and people pleasers. They're very passive, and those are things that, like, you can overcome, and it may take some time, but there's a lot of hope and healing to be had in this nervous system work.
There really is because of the thing that you mentioned earlier too about mirror neurons, which if
Mhm.
people aren't familiar with that, ultimately it just means that our nervous system mirrors the nervous systems of those around us.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of science behind that. And
Yeah.
so if that's the case, and let's say that my partner is unwilling to do any of their work, but I'm doing a lot of my own nervous system
Mhm.
work and I'm showing up more grounded and regulated, that's going to
Sneaky.
have some kind of I know, it is a little sneaky, isn't it? It's like, that's gonna have an impact on them, and so, anyway, I totally agree. Like,
Yeah.
doing
yeah,
this work as a coupleship is so beautiful and
mhm,
wonderful, and even if your partner's not willing, you can
Mhm.
do incredible work for your marriage, even just doing your own stuff.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I
we
love that.
encourage people that it takes 1 person to change the dance,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, for
I love that. Well, to help out, I want to wrap up here by letting you know a couple of things that Dr. Baker has here. She has 2 amazing, what I think are amazing resources.
They are
One,
amazing
I'm going to let
resources.
her talk about this one first, is your collaborative calm cards. These are free, you offer, and I'm going to put links in the show notes so you can get all these things. But talk about what those collaborative calm cards are that you made for couples.
Yes. So I was kind of running up against this a lot with my clients, this dynamic that we're talking about people really trying to get to a place of I want to be that safe space for my partner, but I have no idea how to do that. And so
Yeah.
I
Mm,
was like, well, let's create some flashcards for that. And so that's what I did. And so I made these little cards and they just have brief phrases on them. And so
Mhm.
things like I'm listening with no judgment or I learned so much from you. I love you even when we disagree. We are a team. We'll get through this together. And so there's actually I think like 20 or something like that of these cards and they have the phrase on one side and then on the back they have when you might use that phrase with your
Love that
partner.
part.
mhm,
So yeah, so like I'm listening with no judgment. I might use this when my partner is sharing something that they feel ashamed or insecure about. So that would be
Mm.
like an example of when I might use that. I have a little bit about why it works. And then I have some follow-up actions. So if I say this, I'm listening with no judgment. Some follow-up actions might be to maintain open body language. So let's not
mhm,
cross our arms at this moment, you know.
mhm.
Uh, and I might ask clarifying questions without offering solutions. So it's just like being curious, which I didn't get a chance to say this earlier. And I just want to add this little note here. That is one of the biggest gifts to your marriage is curiosity.
Mm,
Yes, it
mhm.
is.
Yes, because here's the science behind that. You cannot be curious and traumatized at the same time.
Nice.
Oh,
So
well.
yeah, so it's 2 different areas in your brain and they can't be active at the same time. So if you find that you have like trauma reactions in your partnership,
Mhm.
try to take a moment and ask, how can I be curious right now? How can I find a place of curiosity? Because that's going to shift you out of that like traumatized part. So anyway, just a side note.
No, that's
Love
great.
that,
That's
love
great stuff.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is great, and so and these cards are great for you to, like, study on your own and learn those,
Yes.
but also you have things if you go sign up to get these cards, you actually will send out somewhat like directions to them, like how to use them, and I think they're a great tool for your marriage, and there's absolutely no reason why you should not get these cards. So go click the link in the
Mhm.
show notes and
Yeah,
grab
especially
you some.
especially husbands. If you're a husband listening to this,
Mhm.
a lot of husbands will say, "I don't know what to say. I don't know how to respond." I literally, in session when we used to do in person, would write
Yeah.
down some things on a piece of paper or a little sticky, hand it to the husband. The husband would read it and go, "These won't work." I'm like, "Show them to
Just
your
saying.
wife. Show them
Yeah.
to your wife."
Yeah.
And he shows them to the wife. She's like, "See, I can't get anyone to the say."
Yes. Yes. And sometimes we just need a little support because we didn't learn these things from
Mm,
our family of origin, you
right.
know? And just as a side note, the cards, you can do them in printable form if that's your vibe, or they're also digital. So you can even have them on your phone. And
Huh?
just like when you're not sure what to say, you could look at those on your phone as well. So yeah.
If you get a sneaky side looks to your
I
phone,
know,
flip,
just
flip, flip,
right.
flip.
You're
Oh,
like, I'm just looking at the nervous
what are you
chord
doing?
state.
Checking scores. By the way, I'm listening without judgment.
And that's
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I love it.
that's awesome. All right, and then the second thing you have is the Somatic Wellness Collective membership. And
Yes.
Mhm.
this is actually something I am in. I am a student in there myself, and I think it is a fabulous resource. And it's a
Yeah.
monthly membership where you can learn all about the nervous system and activities and how to identify maybe where you're at, what your tendency is, and how to get out of that and how to become more regulated. So it's a great thing. So share with the listeners about that membership.
Yeah, yeah. So you just did so beautifully. It's like
Mhm.
it's monthly subscription kind of learning community. So it's not therapy, even though I am a therapist. It's very educational and it's very, my hope is very practical and skills. There is
Mhm.
so much, yes, there is like trauma work to be done in the
Mhm.
nervous system world. There's also just regulation. And regulation
Yes.
is something that can be taught and practiced and really like creating rhythms around that will change your life, has changed my life. I can speak to that.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, so that's kind of the purpose of the community. You get like monthly on demand classes that you can kind of watch whenever you like. There's also 2 live classes a month that will include things like Q&A, like guest interviews, like morning movement routines that you can do to kind of get more embodied for your day, things like that. It also includes like a integration workbook, which I know Jamie, you
Good.
had mentioned the worksheets from that
Yeah.
earlier. Yeah, so it kind of really helps you take the material from the on-demand classes and help integrate it into your story and your personal life. And then we also have a really sweet little like Facebook community private group where we can just like encourage each other and what co-regulate, like having community, like I said earlier, like that's so important to have people that you're doing the journey with.
Yeah.
So,
So, and again, we're going to put this all in the show notes so people will be able to
Mhm.
find this information, find your cards, and to be able to find you.
Yeah,
yes.
we'll let you know where she's at and all the work that she's doing. But
Yeah.
like, thank you so much for coming
Yes.
on and sharing with us. This is like highly valuable and
Mhm.
it is so worth it. Go get those cards. And if you have work you want to do or if you want to explore this topic, again, what I opened with, it is life changing, just like you had shared.
Oh, yeah.
And so it is so well worth it. And it might very well be the missing link you have to like healing yourself and bringing more healing and regulation in your marriage. And so it's so worth it to do this work. So if you want to explore that, I really encourage you to be part of the membership and go get all the free things and follow Christine on Instagram. There's so many great things she puts out there. But thank you so much for being with us. And we just appreciate you being willing to pour into our followers.
Yes, it was such a joy.
Great. Thanks.